Well, I kind of want to just talk about the whole Netflix, Warner Brothers, and Paramount situation because it's been, basically confirmed now that Paramount will um, be buying Warner Brothers. And obviously, there are people who are very negative online about this, um, mainly due to the fact that, uh, some of the money for this is from the Middle East. So, like, what's that going to involve? And which obviously that's not good. And also, people have concerns with, how uh, David Ellison and his ties to Trump, considering that Trump and his dad have known each other for years. Uh, so there's stuff like that. Um, I want to try to look on the positive side, though I do want to at least stipulate up front that I would have rather have Warner Brothers be not bought by anybody. I'd rather them just stay, you know, as they are. And but you know, at this point, it doesn't look like that's an option. So, and especially considering they have a lot of debt, so Paramount's gonna get that debt, and apparently some of the stuff they're aiming to do with Warner Brothers has to do with some of the stuff that I want to talk about, such as theatrical films, theatrical releases. Obviously, I like films in theaters. Um, I've never made a secret about that. That's pretty well known. Um, I try to go to the theater as often as I can to see movies. Some years there's more movies that are coming out on a consistent basis that I'm going, and I go to the theater quite a bit. And other times there are years that's not happening so much, and so I don't go as often as I would like. But and in some cases, like last year, there weren't a whole lot of movies I wanted to see on the big screen. But then there are those that I did want to see, but they kind of just came and went as soon as they came out, which was a disappointment. And Netflix, they aren't really fond of the theatrical model. I remember the CEO saying like he thought it would be great if there was like a 17-day window for theaters or something like that. At least some kind of comment. I remember reading that, but then of course there's various articles and stuff of comments like that, and so he's people will sometimes they'll be taken out of context, and sometimes if you find the full context, it's you know maybe it's better, sometimes it's worse, but still, it's just I'm not fond of that model personally. Plus, also, they generally speaking will just release films for the bare minimum, specifically in the key places. Originally, it was just Los Angeles, but now it's in more theaters, to where you can watch a film for a couple of weeks in theaters in order to be eligible for the Academy Awards. Paramount has been very great about theatrical films. Um, Now, does that mean they always have great films every year? No. But the theatrical experience is great. Another thing is physical media. Netflix does not really do too many movies or even shows on physical media. Uh, Sometimes they will, usually say like with the Criterion Collection, which in a bit I'll show what I've got. But yeah, they will sometimes release certain movies of theirs like to like a boutique label. But so those are some, I think, big positives. Theatrical films will still happen with Warner Brothers, whereas, even though they did say with Warner Brothers at Netflix they would absolutely keep the theatrical release for those films, people were very wary and not trusting of that. And some said that might be like something that they'll say publicly and may do initially. Maybe after like a year or two or whatever, after a while, they'll start to slowly reduce the theatrical run of certain films being released by Warner Brothers, and as after a while, they will then they will just then basically put a Warner Brothers film just like on Netflix or I guess at HBO Max, since that's Warner Brothers streaming service. So and it's like people actually these days don't really want to have too many streaming services, because anymore it's like if you want to be able to watch all the stuff going on, that's what you gotta do. And yeah. And as another positive note, I guess, at least in terms for me being a fan of a particular franchise, which maybe some of you might have guessed from this video where I might be going with this, especially with physical media and also theatrical. It kind of ties in, but the Friday the 13th franchise will then be whole again, because after Part 8, Paramount sold the franchise to, or at least the rights specifically of Jason and Camp Crystal Lake and all of that, except for the name Friday the 13th. Hence why the three films, reboot, that's another thing, but the next three films have just Jason. Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and also it's thanks to New Line buying Jason Voorhees and Camp Crystal Lake that Freddy vs. Jason was able to come to life after a lot of talks in the 80s and nothing ever happening. And of course, New Line was then bought by Warner Brothers. So that would be cool, And since, yeah. And, in Arrow, obviously they released Jason Goes to Hell, Jason X, and the Friday the 13th reboot. On Arrow, hopefully we'll be able to get an Arrow release of Freddy vs. Jason to basically complete the New Line saga, though this was co-produced by Paramount also. They kind of, New Line and Paramount, they kind of split the distribution, domestic and international, basically. So that was how that film was able to come about. But yeah. And obviously Paramount has been releasing Friday the 13th on 4K and 1 and 2. I don't have the 45th anniversary though. I might later on this year. But shall see what happens. But I don't think there's much new, but I could be wrong. Apparently, though, this version is just the Roman numeral, whereas the 45th anniversary, has just a normal number 2, like there on the side. Yeah, but on the cover, yeah, it's just part 2, and hey, it's Roman numeral on the side also. I think if you're a Friday the 13th fan, this is some pretty good news. Though, of course, there are people who just aren't happy with this. I mean, again, I'm not happy with Warner Brothers being bought by Warner Brothers, or Warner Brothers, by Paramount, or really anyone. But if this was an inevitability, unfortunately, I guess, in order for like theatrical films and physical media, I guess that's an upside, I guess. Because, I mean, yeah, I've got The Irishman, which is a Netflix film. But again, that is considering all the various films Netflix has produced. The Criterion Collection just has a handful of films, so. Yeah. But, I'm trying to look on the bright side, at least, in terms of, like, there'll be theatrical films with Warner Brothers. Physical media will still be a thing, whereas if it was Netflix, maybe once in a while, if a very well-respected filmmaker had a movie that was just so popular that, like, okay, this deserves like a Blu-ray release. And maybe Criterion or a boutique label or whatever would be able to put that out, but it would basically be a gamble, but who knows. So yeah, that's what's going on here. And next week is Friday the 13th, so, I'll probably be watching some of these films again. Just like last month, but yeah. Yeah. So you can leave me your thoughts. I didn't want to get super political or anything, so I just didn't want to really dwell on the whole political aspects, but, it's good to acknowledge stuff like that, because, yeah. It's just, this whole thing is just kind of, it's been quite a ride to watch, but, unfortunately, it's like, this, because of all the debt that Warner Brothers accumulated, I guess they didn't really want to declare bankruptcy, though I've seen some people say, like, oh, well, Paramount's gonna, like, clean house for Warner Brothers. I'm like, oh, they'd have to, Warner Brothers would have to have a, get clean house no matter what, even if Netflix owned it, bought it and owned it. They would do that because, you keep the essential people and then you get rid of everyone else and then you hire new people. That's what often happens. I guess there could be a situation, there have been over time where cleaning house was not really a thing, perhaps. Like, they just kept everyone. But that's such a rare scenario that, obviously in this situation that's not happening. But upshot, Warner Brothers films will still be in theaters. since Paramount likes, home video, we'll still get Blu-rays and DVDs, 4Ks, and all that. So you know, I'm pretty sure a good chunk of my audience who watches my stuff likes collecting Blu-rays and DVDs and all that. So in that sense, that's good. And if you're a Friday the 13th fan, Jason is basically under one roof and back with Paramount. So maybe we'll be able to get another Friday the 13th film with the Friday the 13th label on it at some point. Who knows? Obviously, there's the whole Crystal Lake show, so we shall see what's going on there. But, yeah. Anyway, yeah, you can just, again, leave your thoughts if you have any. Or not, whatever. I just wanted to try to look at positively on this, as much as you can. And granted, the whole Friday the 13th thing is a bit of a selfish thing, but, so many people do focus on the negatives, and I can't blame people. Because in a situation like this, there are negatives. But, there are some positives, and I think sometimes those kind of get overlooked. Of course, I'm sure there's other positives I did not address, similar with negatives, but yeah, I kind of want to just focus on here's two negatives and here's two positives. And I guess a bonus positive on the fact that I'm a fan of Friday the 13th, but, not everybody is. And so on that level, there went a jet. But on that, so on that level, it's good news for me. But, people who probably don't care, whatever, who cares? So I absolutely understand people who aren't super fond of these films, and also also Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street. This is New Line Cinema, so that franchise is also owned by Paramount. So maybe there'll be something with that franchise. I don't know. Yeah, after the 2010 remake, there hasn't been much going on with Freddy, so. But apparently that also has to do with, Wes Craven's, I think, estate and everything, which I think is fairly understandable, Even though he didn't have a whole lot to do with the franchise. After a while, still, his family would still want probably to make sure, as well as his estate, that that character and that world is handled properly. And with the whole Friday the 13th stuff all pretty much settled now, with Victor Miller, Sean Cunningham, and all that. And with a TV show, hopefully that's going to be good. And hopefully we shall see what the future holds in terms of feature films with Jason also. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I've rambled on enough now. Because, my point has been, I think, made clear of the positivity of this situation that you can find. At least from the perspective that I, as a theater goer and Blu-ray collector, have. I really do wish they would hurry up on 3 and 4, and then the other for after the final chapter. For 4K at least, but yeah. Anyway. That's my thoughts. You can leave me yours. I hope you're all doing well. Hope you're all having a great day. And I will talk to you all later. Bye.